All right, everybody, settle in, grab your coffee, or maybe something stronger if you're driving, because today we are walking into a battlefield.
We are.
And I don't just mean the literal battlefield in the show we're covering. I mean the battlefield of public opinion. The battlefield of my fantasy show is better than your fantasy show.
It is a dangerous place to be. People have very strong feelings about their dragons and their wizards.
They really, really do.
Yeah.
Today, we are deep diving into episode 5 of the Pendragon Cycle. The episode is titled Merlin's Power, Revealed as the Kings Unite.
A very telling title.
It is. But before we even get to the plot, we have to address the elephant in the room, the massive, fire-breathing elephant. We are working off a review from John Del Arrows, who is a sci-fi and fantasy author himself, and he drops a claim right at the start that, it just stopped me in my tracks.
I know exactly the claim you're referring to.
He says this show, right now, specifically this episode, is superior to Game of Thrones.
Which is a choice, a very bold choice.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off. Think about it. Game of Thrones changed television.
Absolutely. Culturally, it was a monolith.
It had the budget of a small country. It had, total cultural dominance for years.
Yeah.
And here comes the Pendragon Cycle, which, let's be honest, is a bit more niche, a bit more spiritual.
Right. It's not trying to be the same thing.
And this source is saying, no, this is better. So my first question is why? Is he just trying to stir the pot? Is this just clickbait?
I don't think it is. I really don't. When you actually parse through his argument, he isn't talking about the CGI budget.
Yeah, okay.
He isn't comparing the number of extras in the battle scenes or the size of the dragons. He's talking about something much more fundamental. He's talking about, the moral architecture of the story.
The soul of the thing.
The soul of the thing, exactly. The premise here is that the Pendragon Cycle, which is, of course, based on Stephen Lawhead's books Taliesin and Merlin, is just operating on a different frequency.
A different wavelength entirely.
Yes. Game of Thrones was deconstruction. It was about how power corrupts, how everyone is morally gray, how the quote-unquote good guys usually lose their heads because they are naive.
Right. If you try to be honorable in Westeros, you die in season 1. It's a rule.
It's basically the first rule of Westeros.
Yeah.
But Lawhead's work, and by extension this adaptation, is reconstruct.
Yeah.
It's looking at the Arthurian legend through a historical but also a deeply spiritual.
So it actually believes.
It suggests that there is a right, that values actually matter. And our source argues that episode 5 is the moment where this difference stops being theoretical and becomes visceral. You feel it.
Okay, that makes sense. And he backed it up with the score. He gave it a 9.5 out of 10.
A 9.5, and he said he hates giving perfect scores.
So that's basically a 10.
It's basically a 10 for a critic who wants to maintain credibility. He calls it the best one yet. He argues that this is the pivot point for the whole season.
How so?
The narrative arcs are crashing together, the pacing is picking up in a major way, and the character motivations are finally crystallized. You know who everyone is.
So here is our mission for this deep dive.
Yeah.
We aren't just going to recap the cool sword fights, though. Don't worry. We will definitely do that.
Oh, we will.
We need to unpack these parallel storylines. We've got Merlin on one side, Aurelius on the other. We need to look at the skip and flashback structure because that's a whole debate in itself. But mostly, I really want to dig into this theme of power.
Power is the key word for this episode. Absolutely.
Specifically, the difference between power used for domination, which is very, very Game of Thrones, and power used for service. Because, spoiler alert, that seems to be the thesis statement of this entire show.
And it is a thesis statement that is incredibly difficult to pull off without being cheesy or preachy. That's the real challenge here.
That's the tightrope, isn't it? Can you make goodness interesting? Can you make service as compelling on screen as conquest?
It's the question the show has to answer, and I think this episode gives a pretty definitive yes.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So let's start with the nuts and bolts, the structure. One of the things that jumped out at me in the source material was the discussion on pacing. He used the word relentless.
Relentless, yeah.
Now, usually when I hear relentless describing a TV show, I get a little nervous. It usually means we have too much plot and not enough time, so everyone is just running around shouting exposition.
And then this happened, and then this happened.
Exactly. It just becomes a list of events. But he says it's propulsive without being rushed. How in the world did they manage that?
Well, it comes down to narrative economy. The analysis here suggests that episode 5 functions almost like a standalone film within the larger series.
Oh, interesting.
It builds on everything from the previous 4 episodes. You realized there, you need that content. But it has a clear beginning, middle, and end within its own runtime.
Feel a sense of completion.
A real sense of completion. When the credits roll, a major conflict has been resolved. You feel satisfied.
Which is so rare these days. I feel like most streaming shows are just one 10-hour movie chopped into random slices.
Right.
You end an episode and nothing is actually resolved. They just ran out of time.
We call that the Netflix bloat. And this episode, thankfully, avoids that. And a big part of its success here, according to the source, is how they handled the book-to-screen adaptation, specifically regarding Merlin's time.
Okay, let's unpack this skip and flashback thing. Because if you've read the books, and I know you have, Stephen Lawhead's novel, Merlin starts way, way back.
Oh yeah, it starts at the very beginning. We get his childhood, his training with the Druids. It is a slow, methodical burn. It's a true Bildungsroman, a coming of age.
And if they had filmed the book page for page, we would be on episode 5 right now, and Merlin would probably still be, 12 years old?
Probably, yeah. And he would likely just be learning how to identify herbs in a forest or something like that, which works beautifully in a novel where you have internal monologue and, hundreds.
But on television.
In this market.
In 2026, you need a hook. You need it fast.
You need the swords. You need the politics. You need the threat.
Exactly. So the showrunners made a very controversial choice early on. They skipped the childhood entirely. They jumped right into the adult timeline Aurelius trying to claim the throne, the Saxons invading from the sea. They put the stakes right in your face from minute 1.
Which I imagine pissed off some book purists, right?
Oh, absolutely. The forums were lively.
Yeah.
Where is the backstory? Why don't I understand Merlin's trauma yet? All of that. But now, in episode 5, we see the strategy page. We are getting the flashback.
So it's nonlinear storytelling. It is. We're seeing these glimpses of young Merlin with the hill folk, seeing him interact with the druids and these ancient stones. But because we already know the adult man, we know the high stakes he's facing now. These flashbacks feel like answers to a mystery rather than just a slow prologue.
I actually really like that approach. It's like, okay, imagine meeting a guy who's incredibly intense and quiet, can't quite figure him out. You're interested in him.
Sure.
Then you find out he grew up in a war zone or something. That information hits so much harder because you already know the man he became.
That is a perfect analogy.
If you started with the war zone, you might just tune out because you don't have that connection yet.
That's it, exactly. The source argues this was the smart play for the medium of television. It using the flashbacks to add depth exactly when the narrative needs it.
So it's not just random.
No, it's very intentional. In this episode, we see Merlin perform what is essentially a miracle. The flashback that opens the episode contextualizes how he can do that. It shows us the root of his power.
Right, it connects the dots in real time.
Correct. If we had seen that training scene 5 episodes ago, we might have forgotten the significance. This way, the past informs the present direct. It keeps the relentless pacing of the political thriller in the present while injecting the character depth. It's having your cake and eating it too. Structure.
Okay, speaking of political thrillers, let's talk about Aurelius. Because while Merlin is off having these spiritual flashbacks and rediscovering his power, Aurelius is having a very bad, very muddy day.
The path of the warrior. It is rarely clean. It's almost always.
So set the scene. Aurelius is the brother of Uther Pendragon, who will eventually be Arthur's dad, right?
Yeah.
And he's trying to get himself crowned High King.
Yeah, he's returned from exile in Brittany, and he's trying to unite the fractured tribes of Britain against the looming Saxon threat.
The Sea Raiders.
The Sea Raiders, these terrifying invaders from the sea who are just burning everything in their path. If the Britons don't unite, they die. It is that simple. But the problem is Aurelius himself.
He's got an image problem, a branding.
A huge image problem. The other tribal king, these old, grizzled warlords, they look at him and they see a boy. They see a pretender who grew up soft in a foreign court.
So they don't respect.
Not at all. They haven't seen him bleed. They're conspiring against him, whispering in the dark. Why should we send our sons to die for this?
And leading the I Hate Aurelius fan club is a guy named Lord Eld. Now, the source made a big deal about this name. Eld. Why should we care about him specifically? Why isn't he just some generic ops?
This is a massive lore drop that the show handles somewhat subtly, but for anyone who knows the legends, the implications are huge. Lord Eld is the father of Igraine.
Okay. For the listeners who maybe haven't read Mallory or watched Excalibur in 20 years, explain Igraine like I'm 5.
Okay. Igraine is the mother of King Arthur.
Right.
She is essentially the Helen of Troy of the entire Arthurian legend. Uther Pendragon Aurelius' brother will eventually fall madly in lust or love with her, and that union, with some help from Merlin, produces Arthur.
So, by making Lord Eld the primary antagonist here, the show is setting up a multi-generational Greek tragedy.
Absolutely. This isn't just generic bad guy number 4. This is Arthur's grandfather.
This is Grandpa.
This is the man whose bloodline will define the future of Britain. And currently, he is standing in front of Aurelius in a muddy field, refusing to bend the knee. He basically tells Aurelius, I don't trust you. You haven't earned it, and I'm not fighting.
So Aurelius is completely stuck. Diplomacy has failed. He can't talk this guy down. What does he do? How does he break the stalemate?
He invokes the old way, single combat.
Which is such a classic fantasy trope. I love it. We will settle the fate of thousands of people by hitting each other with sharp metal sticks.
It is. But the execution here is what really matters. The source, John Del Aro, highlights the choreography specific. He contrasts it with a lot of moderns, like, say, The Wheel of Time or The Witcher.
Yeah, The Witcher has that very balletic spinning sword style. It looks amazing, but it feels like a dance.
Exactly. A beautiful, deadly dance. This fight is not a dance. It is a brawl. The source describes it as brutal, grounded, and physical.
What does that mean in practice?
It means you feel the weight of the armor. When they fall, they slam into the mud. You hear the breath get knocked out of them. You hear the armor crunching and the shield splintering. It's heavy. It's desperate.
It's ugly.
It is ugly. And that ugliness is so important because of how the fight ends. This isn't a clean, heroic duel where Aurelius neatly disarms him and holds the sword to his throat. Yield, good sir.
Right. It goes further than that.
It goes much, much further. It gets dirty. There's a point where Aurelius seems to realize he cannot win cleanly. Or perhaps he realizes that a clean victory won't send the message. He wins by severing several of Lord Eld's fingers.
Oof, that's specific.
Yeah, just picture that. The sound of it, it's visceral.
Why fingers? I mean, aside from the fact that it would hurt like hell, is there a symbolism there that I'm missing?
Oh, absolutely. Think about a warrior culture like, what do you need your hands for?
To hold a sword.
To hold a sword, to hold a scepter, to hold the reins of your horse. By taking the fingers from his sword hand, Aurelius isn't just inflicting pain, he is dismantling Eld's utility as a warrior and a leader.
He's maiming him. He's saying, you can never challenge me again.
He's saying, you are no longer a threat, you are broken. It is a statement of total domination.
That is dark, but effective.
Very. Eld, bleeding and maimed and humiliated, bends the knee. But I want you to notice the look on Aurelius's face, or at least the implication of it. He is established as legitimate. He is but he bought that towel.
He proved he's the alpha dog by being the most vicious.
Yes. He is willing to fight his own battle. He didn't send a champion, which gains him a lot of respect, but he is defined by power used for dominate. He conquers to rule.
Which brings us perfectly to the other side of the coin. Because while Aurelius is chopping off fingers in the mud, Merlin is off on a diplomatic mission in the north.
And it is going, arguably even worse for him, at least at first.
Yeah, he's not having a good time at all. He thinks he's going to talk his way to victory.
Right. Merlin travels north, plead with a king there. And we learn there's some bad blood here. Merlin actually abandoned this king years ago for reasons we don't fully understand yet.
So he's not exactly walking into a friendly reception.
Not at all. He walks in hoping to forge an alliance, and instead he is met with just icy suspicion and outright anger.
Oh, look who came crawling back when he needs something.
That's the exact vibe. He's thrown in prison almost immediately. The goal is the same as Aurelius's unite the kingdoms against the Saxons, but Merlin is trying to use words. He's trying to use reason, and it is failing spectacularly.
And this leads to the climax of the episode, which centers on Merlin's companion, a man named Pelus.
Poor Pelus. He just gets caught in the middle. He becomes the pawn in this power struggle. The king decides to sentence Pelus to death, really just a pun.
And the method of execution. The source called it brutal and medieval. What happened?
They weigh him down with heavy stones or chains, it's not totally clear, and they throw him into a body of water, a lake, a deep pool to drown.
Oh, that's a nightmare scenario. It's slow, it's panic, awful.
It is terrifying. And this is the crucible for Merlin. This is his test. He is standing there watching his friend sink, watching him struggle. And he has a choice. He can continue to play the diplomat, he can beg for mercy, or he can act.
And he chooses violence.
Yeah.
Or, well, not violence exactly, not in the same way as Aurelius.
He chooses power, but not the way Aurelius used it. The source describes this scene so vividly. Merlin physically shoves the guards away, so there is that initial moment of physical assertion. But then he switches to something else entirely, something ancient.
What does the source call it?
He uses supernatural authority.
Okay, describe this for me. Is it lightning bolts from his fingertips? Is it a glowing force field? What does it look like?
No, and this is where the show really distinguishes itself from, like, high fantasy video games or something. It's atmospheric, it's elemental. The source notes that the stones around them, the ancient earth itself, starts to tremble.
Like a low hum.
An earthquake?
A resonance. It's as if the very world recognizes Merlin's will and is responding to it. He doesn't chant a spell, he doesn't throw a fireball. He reaches out with his mind, with his will, and he drags Pelus out of the water against gravity, against the weight of the stones.
He just pulls him out. With his mind.
He commands the situation. He rewrites physics for a moment. And the reaction of the court, of the king and his guards, is key here. In a lot of shows, the crowd would cheer, "Hooray for the hero!" Here, Stunned silence. Absolute jaw-on-the-floor terror.
Because they're not watching a trick. They're watching a god.
They're watching a man bend reality. And this connects back to that flashback we talked about earlier, right?
Yeah.
The circular storytelling.
Yes, the source loved this part. He did. Because in the opening flashback, we saw young Merlin standing before these massive druid stones, and he's lifting them, floating them in the air. That was his practice. That was him learning his potential.
One day, kid, you're going to need this skill for something other than lifting rock.
Exactly. And the drowning scene is the fulfillment of that promise. The flashback showed us he could do it. The present shows us why he does. He didn't learn to lift the stones to show off or to build things. He learned to lift the stones so that years later he could save a life.
That is a really, really cool narrative beat. It turns the magic into a tool for salvation, not just a weapon for conquest.
And the outcome is immediate. The king sees Merlin shaking the very earth beneath his, and he changes his mind instantly. He agrees to join the alliance. The northern kings will ride with...
But wait, I want to pause on the king's reaction, because if I'm that king and I see a guy who can literally control gravity, I'm not just impressed, I am terrified out of my mind.
You should be. He's holding a weapon of mass destruction.
So why doesn't the king try to kill him or fall on the ground and worship him? Why does he just agree to the alliance?
Because of what Merlin does next. And this is the thematic deep dive we promised. This is the absolute core of the episode.
The contrast between Aurelius and Merlin. The two paths.
Look at the two victories side by side. Aurelius wins by maiming a man. He demands submission through pain and fear. His message is, I am stronger than you, therefore you follow.
Classic warlord stuff. Might makes right.
Merlin wins by saving a man. He displays power, absolute terrifying power, but he uses it to preserve life. And then, and this is the part the source emphasizes is so critical, he asks the king to join.
Yeah, he doesn't command.
He asks. He doesn't say, kneel before me or I will drown you all. He doesn't say, I am your god now, do as I say. He demonstrates that he could do those things, and then he steps back and offers a choice. He offers partnership.
That is an incredible amount of restraint. If you have the gun, the temptation is always to point it at someone.
Exact. The source calls Merlin a kingmaker, not a... He has the power to dominate. He could easily seize the throne for himself. He could rule all of Britain fear alone, but he refuses. He chooses the role of the servant, the advisor.
The source mentioned Christian morality here, specifically.
Yes, John Delarose is very specific about this. He identifies a strong thread of Christian theology woven into the story. It's this concept of power serve, the biblical idea that the greatest among servant of all.
Which is a very, very different vibe from you win or you die.
Completely different universes, more. In Game of Thrones, restraint is weak. If you show mercy, you get stabbed in the back by someone who doesn't have your scruples.
Right.
In the Pendragon Cycle, restraint is the ultimate. Merlin is powerful because he controls himself, not just because...
It's interesting because usually in fantasy, the wizard character is either the wise old mentor who does very little actual magic, like the early Gandalf.
Right. He's mostly a father figure.
Or he's the artillery. He's the guy you point at the enemy army to blow them up. Merlin here he's almost like a walking, talking nuclear deterrent.
That's a great way to put it. His power is in the threat of its use, which he never follows through on for selfish gain. And the source praises the actor, Tom Sharp, for nailing this very difficult balance.
How does he describe the performance?
He describes it as having quiet authority and deliberate humility. Not that he's shy or weak. It's that he knows exactly what he's capable of, and he is actively choosing not. It's a strength of will.
That is fascinating. It really does flip the script on the usual power fantasy that we see in this genre. Usually the fantasy is having the power. Here, the fantasy is having the character to withhold it.
Well said. That's the whole theme in a nutshell.
Now, we have to pivot to something a little less high-minded. We need to talk about Morgan, because there was a bit of a controversy in the previous episode.
Ah, yes. The ick factor, as the source.
Episode 4 left some viewers, including our source, feeling a little grossed out. There was a scene that very strongly implied Morgan was in a relationship with a young man who was also heavily implied to be her son.
Yes. And for a show that is, as we've been discussing, touting its moral values and its spiritual core, incest is, well, it's a curveball. It felt very Game of Thrones.
Which is the very thing the source is arguing this show is superior to.
Exactly. He called it icky and seemed genuinely disappointed. But episode 5 offers a clarification, a course correct, if you will.
Okay, so what's the clarification?
We find out in this episode, stated explicitly, that the young man is actually her stepson, not her biological.
Okay, so better, I guess. Yeah. It's still not great.
I mean, technically, it's still deeply manipulative. The source calls it a character correction. Morgan is still depicted as absolutely evil. There's no gray area with her. She is grooming this young man. She is twisting him, using him as a weapon against her enemies.
But she's a villain, but she's not that kind of villain. They pulled back from that specific taboo.
Exact. The source expresses a lot of relief about it. He feels like the show walked right up to the edge of that grimdark abyss and then took a deliberate step back. It preserves that clear distinction between good and evil that the show is built. Morgan is bad because she manipulates and corrupt power for it, not because she breaks every taboo known to man, just for shock value.
It sounds like the show is trying to be dark without being nihilist.
That is the perfect distinction. Game of Thrones is often nihilistic. It suggests that nothing matters and everyone is off. Pendragon is dark. People get drowned, fingers get cut off, but there is a moral compass pointing north, higher.
Which brings us right back to that central comparison. The source is really, really bullish on this. He says Pendragon blows away anything related to Game of Thrones.
Those are fighting words in the fantasy community.
They are. Why do you think he feels that strongly? Is it just his personal preference for this kind of story? Or do you think there's a larger shift happening in what audiences want?
I think it's a cyclical thing. You know, we spent the last 15, maybe 20 years, the era of the anti-hero.
Oh, yeah. Walter White, Tony Soprano.
The Lannisters, Don Draper. We loved the morally gray. We were fascinated by the deconstruction of heroism. Oh, look, the hero is actually a narcissist. The noble knight is actually a coward.
It felt realistic. It felt gritty and mature.
It did. But you could only deconstruct for so long before you're left with just a pile of rubble. And I think audiences, and clearly this reviewer is one of them, are getting hungry for reconstruction. They want to see real value.
They want a hero to root for without feeling competent.
Exactly. They want to see a hero who actually tries to be a hero. Not because he's perfect or never makes mistakes, but because he tries, because he believes goodness is worth fighting for.
So that 9.5 rating isn't just about the quality of the filming or the acting. It's about the relief of seeing a story that actually believes in something.
I think that's a huge part of it. He mentions the rewatchability factor is high. And why is that? It's because you aren't just watching for the next plot twist. You aren't just tuning in to see who dies next in a shocking way.
You're watching for the themes.
You are watching for the themes. You are watching to see good struggle against evil and actually stand a chance. And in today's world, that can be a very powerful, very appealing draw.
I can definitely see that. Now, looking ahead to the rest of the season, we have a bit of a math problem.
A timeline problem, a narrative crunch.
The source notes that the show is about 75 to 80% of the way through the events of the novel Merlin.
That's his estimation, yeah.
But there are only 2 episodes left in the season.
And the book is dense. It's not like the last 20% is just an epilogue. It continues way past where we are now. It covers the construction of Stonehenge. It covers the complicated setup for Arthur's birth. Major events.
Oh, wait, Stonehenge. They built Stonehenge in the book.
Oh, yeah. It's a huge plot point. It's this massive mystical undertaking led by Merlin. It's one of the signature sequences of the novel.
So are they going to cram the building of Stonehenge and the conception of Arthur into 2 hours of television? That feels like a disaster waiting to happen.
It would be the Game of Thrones Season 8 problem all over again. Rushing the ending, compressing timelines, making characters make illogical leaps.
So what's the alternative?
Well, the source speculates that they might not do that. He points to a very specific...
Which is?
Look at the season title. The full title is The Pendragon Cycle, The Rise of Merlin.
Okay, The Rise of Merlin.
The Rise, not the life and times of Merlin, not the complete Merlin. That suggests the scope for this first season is intentionally limited.
So the theory is that the season ends sooner than the book does.
The speculation is that the season might end with the unification under Aurelius. That gives them a huge, satisfying climax, the kings uniting, the first major victory sack. But it leaves the rest of the book plot, like Stonehenge, for season 2.
That would be really smart. Let the story breathe.
It would, and it would show a lot of confidence from the studio that they are going to get renewed.
How so?
Well, if they rush to cram everything in, it implies that they are scared of cancellation and trying to give a complete story just in case. If they take their time and end on a satisfying but incomplete note, it shows they trust the audience and the network to bring them back.
I hope they take their time. I want to see Stonehenge built properly, not in a 30-second montage with, like, a pop song playing over it.
Agreed. No construction montage.
So bringing this all home for this episode, we have a dual victory. We have 2 parallel paths that both succeed, but in wildly different ways.
Yeah. Aurelius has won the bodies of the army. He physically dominated his rival to get the troops.
And Merlin has won the minds and souls. He awed the Northern King into an alliance without shedding a drop of blood.
Body and soul, the two halves of the kingdom's strength.
The board is set, the pieces are in place, the Saxons are coming, and we have these two leaders, the warrior and the wizard, with very different philosophies, who now have to work together.
And that tension between them, the man of action and the man of restraint, is going to drive the rest of the show, I guarantee.
It has to. So I want to leave the listener with a final thought, something to chew on before the next episode airs.
Okay.
We talked a lot about Merlin's restraint. He has the power to shake the earth. He can, for all intents and purposes, act like a god if he...
What he serves.
Right. So here is the question. If Merlin is the only person we've seen who can resist the temptation of absolute power, does that actually make him the only person who is truly fit to rule?
That is the great paradox of leadership, the one who doesn't want the power to have it.
Exactly. And to take it one step further, we are facing the Saxons. These are guys who burn villages for fun.
Yeah.
They represent an existential threat.
Total annihilation.
In a world facing that kind of enemy, is Merlin's pacifism a luxury? Is his high-minded morality something they can even afford? Or, when the chips are down, do they actually need the guy who is willing to cut off a few fingers to get the job done?
Do you need the monster to fight the monster?
That's the question. I don't know the answer, but I cannot wait to see them try and figure it out.
It's going to be a wild...
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you for episode 6.
Take care, everyone.